Hello. Okay, good afternoon. It is 1:30, so we'll get cracking into this one. Manage documents in SharePoint. So we have a product called Smart DMS, but really this is just an opportunity to see some cool things inside of SharePoint as well for those that don't necessarily need this product. Use your housekeeping. So we are recording this session and we'll send out the video after I do a little bit of editing and take out my ums and ahs and things like that. So we usually do, and we'll share that out within the next couple of days, hopefully by Friday, if not by Monday. So give me the weekend to get that ready. We also, across the top here somewhere, there'll be Q&As. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to fire them through to the Q&As there. And I'll try and keep an eye on them and we'll answer them as we go. If not, we have a whole Q&A section at the end. So feel free to fire them through. Of course, if it's something really private and personal to you guys, maybe we'll just do that separately afterwards. Just give me a call after and we could talk through your own personal situations. But any random questions you have while I'm talking, just feel free to fire them through and I'll try and grab them as we go. All right. Thanks very much again for joining. Let's get on and take a look. So what is Smart DMS? Now, today's session, obviously, I'm going to drill into what we call Smart DMS, which is a document management system. But for those that aren't interested, like I said earlier, it's actually a good opportunity just to see how we can build some customizations inside of a SharePoint document library. Quite often, we see that most businesses are just using SharePoint for kind of standard folder structure and putting files into folder structures and things like that. And I thought this is a really good opportunity for you to see how we can leverage SharePoint beyond just standard storage. So we're going to cover things like metadata and document properties. We're also going to look at custom views and filtering. And then I'm not going to really show you too much at the back end, but just to let you know that this solution is built using the Power Platform, which is Power Apps and Power Automate. So we're going to show you a little bit at the front end of how that works within this solution. I've added a Copilot warning. We can't go very long now without talking about Copilot. And actually with Copilot agents, for those that attended Anna Marika's last session, we were talking about Copilot agents. What this gives you is the ability to trim the data and the responses to a specific source. And what we've done here is got a demo of how we can tie Copilot specifically to a document library to recall very specific information. So wait for that one to come through. So what is a managed document? So admittedly, this tends to be a question that is asked by larger organizations, but this is actually still a requirement for even quite small organizations to have some control around particular documents that you have. So what we have as a definition is a managed document is a file that is controlled and maintained through a structured process to ensure its accuracy, relevance, and compliance. Some of the key features of it would be to have review cycles of your documents. So this is to ensure that your documents are regularly reviewed to make sure that they're up to date, maybe for compliance or auditing purposes. To implement publishing controls to ensure that only the approved versions and the ones that are published are actually visible and people aren't seeing draft versions with unconfirmed and unapproved changes. Then we've got versioning to make sure that we only have like that single thread of all the versions of the document and you keep a track of all of the changes through that history of the document. And then looking at what's a change request. So I might not have edit access to the document, so I can't actually go in and change it for myself. So I'll put through a change request to say, hey, this document is changing, it's not quite accurate and up to date. Then we can tag documents with owners and experts. So that's who do I ask? If I'm reading a document and I have a query about, let's say, a procedure that's been documented, who do I go to ask? And we have owners and experts. And those they have clearly defined roles, but the owner is responsible for the document and the expert is the person who knows most about the content of the document. Then we have what's called a targeted audience. And an audience is, imagine groups of people within your organization. So you can have the whole organization, but you can also have a subgroup of the organization. So just the sales team, for example. So this really lets me know, is this document relevant to me? Is this my document that I should be aware of and start reading? Okay, we also can start using these as people's induction processes. So you can actually have things like, if imagine your day one experience when you join the organization. So you can come in and say, day one, sit down and read these 20 documents because that's the first thing that you have to do. And for auditing as well, you can actually see who has read the document. And I don't want to go down too dark a pathway, but let's say you had published a procedure manual and one of the staff didn't follow the procedure manual, but they had read and acknowledged that they have read the document, then you could use that as evidence in the future as well. So there's some cool features when we come to talking about document management and what a managed document is. And that's a good summary of them there. Ultimately, though, what I think a managed document gives you is a single source of truth. One of the things we see with a lot of organizations is people create versions. So you'll create a version 1 of a document and you send it out to all of your team. Now what happens is everybody has their own copy of the document. And when you then add a version 2 of the document, you now send that out. As an organization, you have no control as to whether your team are looking at the first version you sent or the second version you sent. So what we try and do with SharePoint is create one single version of the file that then everyone has access to. And you modify the same version of the file. So let's take a health and safety policy, for example. If you modify it, you want to make sure that the next time someone looks at the health and safety policy, they're looking at your latest version. So this is really where we start building this single source of truth. And for anyone who's worked with us through some SharePoint projects, we would have talked about that quite a lot. But yeah, that's really important when it comes to managed documents. Some examples of managed documents, I've touched on a couple already, but most common, it will be companies' policies. So that could be your health and safety policies, your HR policies, IT policies, maybe finance policies and things like that. We could also have compliance documents if you have regulations that you have to comply to. So you can have some documents about that as well. You might even have manuals, user guides, things like that. I've even seen people do like product specs in there, even sales and marketing materials to say, well, here's the approved materials that could go out. And you have that as a managed document. And also training materials as well. So you could actually show your staff, imagine that day one experience. If you have never used a system before, then you can show them through their induction process, all of the materials and the manuals that you've got in that managed document library. But of course, things change, procedures change. And so you want to keep those updated and maintained. I just realized I didn't bring myself into the screen, so I'll do that now. And hopefully now you can all see me. Hello. Next up. It's demo time. Okay, so let's jump out of the slide deck. And as you know, most of the time we don't do demos live, so this could be quite challenging, but hopefully we'll get through it today. So this is a SharePoint site. So most of you might be familiar with landing on a SharePoint site and having access to all of your resources. What we would do is create a separate site called a Smart DMS site, which holds all of your managed documents. And you would navigate through into that site, and then you would have everything related to those controls. The reason we separate this out into its own site is so that we can handle separate permissions of those who can actually modify and edit the documents and those that only have read-only access. Getting into metadata, you'll see straight away that this is a document library with a whole bunch of columns. And these columns are what we use to manage all of these categories and things like that we tag the document with. So you'll see here that we have different categories and we have different document types. So we have policies and procedures, and you can have forms and promotional materials or all sorts of things in there. So this is all highly customizable to whatever drops down and options you want there. You'll see this version column. So this is a really cool column. So when we talked about version control, so we have this document here has been published 5 times. So there's 5 published versions. Whereas this one here, the anti-fraud policy, has been published 4 times. And now I've made some edits. So there are some edited versions, only one, but that's identifying that there is a published version and some edits. And if we scroll down to this one here, so this new sales policy has never been published. So that's showing as version 0.2. So unless I'm an editor and owner of that space, I'm not going to be able to see that document. So it hasn't been published yet. Then we got ownership and experts, which I did touch on earlier, but that's the roles that have been applied to the document. So I can see from here that the COO is responsible for the business continuity and disaster document, and the CFO is this fraud policy here. Now, often The expert and the owners are the same people because they're the ones writing the documents, but sometimes you might have, let's say you were writing a procedure manual for using some machinery. The responsible person might be the health and safety officer or the storefront officer or something like that. But actually the person who uses the machinery might be the subject matter expert. So you can have that differentiator there. So you can see the IT manager is the expert, but the owner is the COO. So that's the person responsible. Then we look at audience. So in an audience group, so you see this document here is tailored for the sales and marketing team. So that's the members of the sales and marketing team. They'll receive a read task. So when I publish the document, the sales team will get a task to say you have to read the document that's been published, or when it's been modified and changed and republished, they can get the read tasks. Otherwise, we can tag it to everyone except external users. So the whole organization will get a read task. So things like health and safety and things like that, you're more likely to pick the entire organization because that's quite an important one. But let's say you had health and safety whilst visiting clients, then you might only do the sales team and your servicing team or something like that, right? And you could pick individual people here. So this one, the actual would only go to Adele and Diego here. So that's what audience means. Then you got induction tagging. So you can tag certain documents as being induction documents. And what happens here is that when a new sales and marketing staff member joins the organization, they will receive tasks to read all of the everyone documents because they are, of course, part of the everyone group, but they are also part of the sales and marketing team. So therefore, they will also get these documents to read as well. So that's building them a task list for them to actually start working their way through. Okay. So that covers most of those categories that you set up within the document. And then we start looking at the review cycles. So as an owner of the document in this scenario here, the CFO is overdue. So this was due on the 1st of February. It was last reviewed on the 20th of March, but it has a 24-month review cycle. Now, admittedly, this is just a demo site. So we just put a bunch of documents in there the other day. So it's not entirely accurate to what someone would use it for, but in 24 months from the last review date, the next review date will be due. So then the CFO will start to get notifications to say you have a document that's due for review, and they would have to process that as a task. And they can either publish it again with modifications and changes, or they just publish it with no changes, and it just sets the review cycle for another 24 months. And this is customizable on a document by document basis. You see, this one's 24 months, these are 12 months, and these are 6 months. So for the documents that you want to review a lot more regularly, then you set those to 6 months, and you could do that by document. And you can also tag things like site locations. So if you had a Auckland version of a document versus a Wellington version, or a New Zealand versus Australia, we can start building out some categories in there to say in what scenario those documents apply. Now, once you've got this library, what you could start doing is chopping it up through filtering. So views and filters to then identify easy navigation pathways. So if you look up in this top menu here, so we can have promoted documents by category. So you can look here and say, okay, well, if I want to look at all sales documents, I can look here, or I just want to look at the sales policies, I can navigate here, and it's going to filter that list by everything that's within sales and is a policy, because we have these two filters applied. You can also directly link to a document as well. So if you look in this top menu, we've actually got policies as examples. So you could go into the menu, and if I wanted to look at the code of conduct policy, then I could directly link to that policy in here. And if you look at what we've got here, so you've got your, let's say your top 4 most common policies plus more HR policies. And then when you click on that, it would navigate through and filter those. But these would be direct links into those documents. Okay. So you could build really complex but quite detailed document links that take you to all those important things. If you imagine like expense forms, so you have an expense form in here that you're expecting people to fill in every single time, then you'd promote that maybe up into the finance section of your menu and things like that as well. So you can get some really cool features and functions just by just handling this metadata navigation. So I know metadata is quite an interesting topic for people to talk through. Everyone is very used to folder structures, but there are definitely some scenarios where metadata tagging on a library just makes sense. So managed documents is a really good example because you could build those columns out and actually have some structure and some business processes around those. But you could also have things like contracts management where you have start and end dates. You could have project management documents where you have a project manager and start and end dates, and you could tag it to clients. You could have things like published media, so approved logos, letterheads, and all those other things. So that would be tagged that those are approved and available for downloading. So metadata could be really cool. And this is obviously just one use case that we use for it. What we like with managed documents is this ability to also bring those properties, so those are metadata document properties, into the documents themselves. So when people print those documents, you can actually bring this information into it. So let's take a look at this ethics policy. Actually, I'm going to just show you this one first before I show the ethics one. If we actually preview that, so this is the discount and pricing policy. And if we actually scroll down, you see how we're actually pulling in the information. There's the document properties inside the document. So every time we refresh and republish the document, those properties change in that little table at the bottom. So if anyone prints these and puts them into their manuals, you'll then be able to see that there's a difference between the published version on your intranet versus the printed version in your files. And we've built for some clients some really smart workflows where we say, okay, well, if someone's going to print it, we're going to put a watermark behind the document that says this is now an uncontrolled document because it's being printed, whereas the controlled version of the document is the one that's in the SharePoint library. So that becomes some really cool like workflows that we can build and customize, especially for your needs. But that's a really cool feature, and you start bringing them in here. In fact, some of these other things are tagged as well. So that's actually the title of the document. So if that changes, that will automatically update. And plus, the scope of the document is the summary that we've written inside the library as well. So there's some really cool things you could do. Right, now let's have a look at the experience from somebody else. So if we look at Diego here, so this is another staff member within the organization, you'll see that Diego, just keep note of the top right corner here. So Diego, and this is me. So Diego has access to this library, but only has read-only access and can't access anything that's in draft. So you see that they've got their little pencil crossed out there. So that means that he's only got read-only views. And you'll see that obviously can't even see this new policy because it has never been published. Whereas this one has been published, but you see it's version 4.2. So I can see version 4.2, but Diego can only see version 4.0. So I would have to publish this document with the changes in order for Diego to see those changes. So I'll just preview that. So just to show you the differences between the two. So you see, I put it in bold red letters, but so the version 4.2 has had a major change to the document, and Diego's version is obviously taking a while to load, but that won't have the red text. Okay, you just have to take my word for that. I don't know. Oh, there we go. So it doesn't have the red text. So moving on slightly, let's just jump back to full screen on this one, and I'll show you some other cool features. So we've now obviously got this information that we're tagging against the document. So what else can we do with that? So if we have a look at this go to, so let's say as a staff member, you search for a document and it doesn't come up with something. So I search for what's my daily lockup procedures, and nobody has written that document. That's what we call a suggestion. So you would then submit a new suggestion of a document, and that notifies your document controlling team, and they will then look to generate the document and assign an owner or get the document written. What it might be is just the search terms that I use don't appear in an existing document. So if I search for a lockdown procedure, but it's actually called a close down procedure or something like that, or an end of shift close down, then maybe then I can be like, okay, well, let's add the search terms into the document to make it more relevant to the people searching. So it could be that, but that's what a suggestion is. And as a document controller, I can then approve those suggestions and then start working on writing those documents out. Then we've got just a list of a way of accessing the documents. So all of our policies, all of our procedures and processes, but I think I've showed you that enough. Now we've got tasks. So this is built on tasks. So there's an engine behind the scenes that's publishing tasks daily of whether you have documents to review. So I'm a document owner and my documents are due for review, or I'm a document audience member and I have documents to read. So let's start with documents to review. So imagine in this scenario that I am, who am I? The health and safety officer. So you can see in here that I'm responsible for 3 documents. The green one here isn't due until September the 28th, and you can see that this is compliant for the next 6 months, so I don't have to worry about that one. But these two I do have to worry about. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to read the document, and I'm going to make all the changes I need to make, and then I'm going to set it ready for publishing again. So I will complete my review cycle, which will pop open a little window, hopefully. And then I answer 3 simple questions once it loads. So this is how to republish a document, and I have to put in some publishing comments so I can say what it was exactly that I've changed since in this version that's been published. And then I can commit it to its review cycle. So yes, complete for this review period. And if this was a 12-month review cycle, it will push the next review date out by 12 months, and it will set the last review date to today. And then I can publish the audience task. So I can opt to, yes, I do, and yes, I don't, or no, I don't. And you can imagine that quite often some people are just making grammatical or spelling changes and things like that. So you're not going to send tasks out to everybody. You'll just publish it with no tasks, and people will just have the latest version. Okay, so that's how that works. So that's me reviewing my documents. Then you've also got the documents that I have to read. So this is my task list as a staff member of all the things I have to read. And I've been pretty good. I've only got one. But you imagine on the day that I joined the organization, there might be 20 documents that I'll just have to sit there, open the link. So this is the sales and ethics policy. I will launch that, read the document, and then I mark it as complete to say that I have read this document. And that's now captured on an audit trail. So if anyone said they didn't follow the procedure, you'll see all of the times that they've said that they've read the document and all of the modifications and changes to the document. So that's how that works. So that's our task management, which is pretty cool. We have some other features as well. So the ability to tag it by application. If you imagine you have some software, so project management software or SharePoint or Office 365 or finance or payroll systems and things like that, and the staff member joins and they've never used that software before, if you tagged a whole bunch of procedure manuals that with the software, then that's kind of creating a bit of these are the things you need to know of how to use the software and things like that. But you could also use that to tag other things as well. So you might have regional or client-based specific documents and all sorts of things. So it's just an alternative way of tagging. So under like my applications, actually, I'll just go to all applications, but you're literally just listing those applications there. Okay, I'm just conscious of time. So I'll just show you the Power App side of things. So this is how to create a new managed document. And this is how we start controlling that process. So rather than just, putting documents in there, then we actually funnel people through this process here. So you say, okay, well, I'm going to create a new policy and I have a default policy template, or I'm going to create a procedure, and you can have different templates for that. So you might have a quick procedure that's just a couple of bullet points, or you can have a full procedure manual that you're going to put images and all sorts of things in there. And then you have to give the document a title. And I'm just going to put some things in here. Then we progress through. So then you've got who are the owners of the document. So I'm going to say that this is the health and safety officer, and it is also the health and safety officer who's the expert. And this is where you pick the audience. So you could say, let's do everyone, because health and safety is very important. So let's put everyone in the organization, then pick a category. So I'm going to pick health and safety. This is where you could do the applications. In this case, it's not really relevant unless maybe I had a health and safety application that I needed people to work on. And this is where I mark it as whether it is an induction or not. So I say, yes, it is an induction because it's very important. Then we go next. And then you set the review cycle. So this one has a 12-month review cycle, which sets the next review date to the 2nd of the 4th. And this is where I can pick whether it is an Auckland document or a Wellington specific document or whatever I choose to put into that drop down. And then I would go ahead and create that document, and that would publish it. And then I would then have to go and populate the content of the document. So that's how that works. Then let's jump into Copilot. So what's really exciting is these changes around Copilot and the ability to create agents. And a document library like this that holds all of your policies is a really good use case for it. So you'll see here down on the right-hand side, we have these published agents. And these are agents that have been specifically published, tied to that library. And this is really important. A lot of people forget that they just give people Copilot licenses and then say, oh, well, now Copilot has kind of free reign to all of your content throughout SharePoint. But if you imagine that I had 7 versions of the same document distributed across in my OneDrive, and I've got a couple of old sites and I've shared it through Teams, how would I know that Copilot will actually respond with the actual version of the document that is current and the one that's been published? So that's why we create these agents that are tied to the Smart DMS library, so that it will always respond with that last published version. And what we could do here is go, okay, so, I mean, we've got these little prompts here, but so company policy query, and I'm going to say, what is our company's policy on health and safety? And you can ask, obviously, a lot more specific questions, but I'm just conscious of the time. But for anyone who's used Copilot would know what that's about to generate. So that's now pulling those details out from our health and safety policy. I just want to talk quickly about the future of where this is heading. So agentic AI is going to continue to evolve. Now, this is pulling out that as a response rather than pulling it from the web. So if you imagine if you search for health and safety policy in things like ChatGPT or Copilot in the web search, you're just going to get public people's health and safety policies, but this is specifically your health and safety policy. Now, imagine if I asked, how do I report an incident, a health and safety incident? So obviously at the moment, it will just return what we've written as the procedure manual for reporting an incident. But imagine, and we're not far off from being able to do this, but imagine it actually stepped the user through a process of saying, well, okay, who was involved in the incident? When did the incident occur? Is there, has there been a resolution to that, or does it still need to be resolved? And then notifies the health and safety officer within the organization. And that's actually using this agent there to kick off a business process. So I think it's really exciting where this Copilot agent journey is going to go in the future. I think it's really cool and coming up with those really good use cases for it. And I think for me, this is one of them. Right. Okay. I think that's probably enough for the demo. So I will jump back to my slides. Bring those up here. And just as a bit of a recap, so there's your document tagging, and you've got document control built in with read requests and the AI-enabled Copilot. And we talked about what the chat currently does, but the future of those Copilot actions, I think, could be really cool in the future. So, yeah, keep an eye out for that. For our Smart DMS, for those that are interested, we do have a version 2 in the works, which would be, at the moment, we're just basing it on links to views and links to libraries and things like that. But the next version of it's going to have an app with a dashboard of accessing your task lists and stuff like that. So that is coming soon. If you're interested in it and you want to join the wait list, then just email me. Now we got time for some Q&A. While I am answering those, if there's any come through, I'll just bring this up, which is our next session. So our next session is on Microsoft Lists. We've touched a little bit. So what we've built there with the library is very similar to a Microsoft list, but a library is obviously aimed towards documents, whereas a list doesn't necessarily have a document associated with it. And we'll cover that in a lot more detail next time. Let me jump in and have a look. I see there's some chat. Yes, so we got a question about getting a copy of today's session. So we are recording this and we will send it out within the next couple of days. Feel free to share that with any of your team that might be interested in this, but also we'll check it on YouTube as well. So it will be kind of public, usually over the weekend. We try and get it done by Friday, but sometimes I've got meetings stacked up, so I end up doing it over the weekend. So Monday at the latest, that's our target for that. Were there any other questions? No. Okay. Obviously, I've answered everything through that process, but feel free to jump on and send me any emails if you've got any questions specifically about that, or if you have some use cases for your own libraries to actually start building some of these workflows and have the metadata tagging, then just reach out. More than happy to have those conversations. Right. Other than that, I think we've just hit 2:00. So hopefully you found this valuable and look forward to catching you all next time. Thank you.